In Chapter 5, we're moving on to something that is a little bit different than what you've done before, but it turns out it's really related to the linear equations we've been working with. So we're starting off with talking about the domain and range of a function. So a couple of things that you need to know. A function, it's a relationship between two values that pairs each input with exactly one output. And we'll talk more about this in a second. So that is what a function is. So for our learning goal for today, we are going to be looking at the domain and range based on graphs and tables. So I will find the domain and range of functions from graphs or tables. So in order to do this, we really need to know what domain and range are. And these are words. There's actually a couple of different descriptions. We can use a couple of words that all mean the same thing. So to start off with, domain, that's going to be all of your input values. What are you allowed to put into the function? Another way to think about it, once we start using variables, this is going to be your x values. So your domain is your inputs. It's usually associated with your x values. And then range is anything that can come out of the function. So these are all of your output values, which we typically associate with y. So our y values, anything that y is allowed to be, is considered the range. The best way to really get an idea of what a function is and what domain and range are is to just do some problems with them. So here I have a graph of a function. If you think about a function as like a machine, what's happening is you're putting something into the machine, that's your input or your domain, and you're getting something else out of the machine. That would be your output or your y values. So the things that you can get out come from your range. So for this function right here, I have 5 points. And I can look at each of those points and figure out when I put something in, what do I get out? So what I want to do to find the domain and the range of this function, first I want to write each of these points as an ordered pair. So if this is 0, 0, my first point is -4, 1. My second point is -2, -1. My third point is 1, 1. My fourth point is 2, 2. And my fifth point is 4, 0. So what I did first, I just came up with my ordered pairs. The domain of this function is going to be all of my inputs, or all of my x values. So I can put -4 into my function, I can put -2 in, I can put 1 in, I can put 2, and I can put 4. So the way that I'm going to write that, my domain is -4, -2, 1, 2, and 4. And then my range is going to be all of my outputs, or all of my y values. So my outputs are all of these values right here. And you'll see then for my range, I get 1, -1. I get 1 again. I don't have to write it a second time. I get 2, and I get 0. Or if I want to be a little bit more precise about it, I can put it in numerical order. So my range would be -1, 0, 1, and 2. So what you see here is for each of these numbers that I put in, I'm getting exactly one number out. I can't put in -4 and get out 1 and also put in -4 and get out 3. That would not be a function. But this is a function because each of my inputs has exactly one output. We also have two more terms that I'm going to add to our definitions up here. Another way of thinking about domain is our independent variable and another way of thinking about the range is the dependent variable. So really what this means is for my domain, I can pick any number that's available in my domain. So it's independent. I can pick anything I want that's in the domain or anything that's part of, one of my inputs. And what's going to happen is I'm going to get one output for that input. So the output is going to depend on what I put in. So that's why my independent variable goes with my input. My output is dependent because the output depends on what you put in. So those are just two more ways of thinking about domain and range. So input, independent variable, that's typically our x values. It's going to be on the horizontal axis in a graph. Our range are our output values. We also call those our dependent variables. It usually goes with y, but that's going to be the vertical axis on our graph. Okay, here's a word problem that helps us think about what functions are a little bit more. So the function y equals 24x gives the number y bottles of water you have after buying x cases. We want to identify the independent and dependent variables, and we also, for part B, if we're given a specific domain, we want to say what the range is. So to start off with, let's look at the independent and dependent variables. So if you think about a situation, what's happening is you're going to buy X cases of water, and depending on how many cases you buy, that will tell you how much water you have or how many actual bottles you have. So even if I hadn't told you that X usually goes with the independent and Y goes with the dependent, that's just what makes sense. You're going to buy a certain number of cases. The number of bottles you have depends on the number of cases you buy. So our independent variable is going to be X, or the number of cases you buy, and our dependent is going to be Y, or the number of water bottles that you end up with. So then next we have what our domain is, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and it's asking for the range. One way we can show this is with an input-output table. So my domain is 0, 1, 2, or 3. So maybe at this particular store they're on sale and you can only buy up to 3 cases at a certain price or something. If I put in 0 or I don't buy any cases of water, then I don't have any bottles of water. If I buy 1 case, I would do 24 times 1. That gives me 24 bottles of water. If I buy 2 cases, I have 24 times 2, or 48 bottles of water. If I buy 3 cases, I would do 24 times 3, and I would get 72 bottles of water. So remember, the input is usually associated with X, the output is associated with my Y, which means my domain, as they stated, is 0, 1, 2, and 3. My range is just going to be the outputs. So my range is 0, 24, 48, and 72. Those are the only possible outputs I can have if my inputs are 0, 1, 2, or 3. And as far as this section goes, that's about it. So it's really just looking at the situations and deciding what is your domain, what's your range, what's your input, what's your output, and that sort of thing. So you should be all set.